In 1453, the Ottomans broke Constantinople, ended Rome, controlled 3 continents, every trade route between Europe and Asia, the most lethal military on earth. 600 years of dominance. Then, methodically, invisibly, the empire ate itself from the inside out. Not from invasion, not from revolution, from a financial innovation that started as genius and ended as autopsy. The Ottomans didn't lose a war. They auctioned off their own sovereignty, one tax contract at a time, until there was nothing left to sell. Every empire faces the same structural problem. How do you pay for a massive permanent army without bleeding the treasury dry? European kingdoms solved it badly. Mercenaries during wartime, dismissed during peace. Expensive, unreliable. Every laid-off soldier became a potential bandit or enemy recruit. Standing armies demanded permanent taxation, which demanded permanent bureaucracies, which consumed the very revenue they collected. The Ottoman answer was surgically different. Don't pay soldiers with gold, pay them with revenue. A sipahi, a cavalryman, received the right to collect taxes from a designated piece of land. In exchange, maintain your own horse, your own weapons, and show up when the Sultan calls. State kept the land, sipahi kept the income. No central payroll, no logistics nightmare, no treasury drain. The incentives were precision engineered. Protect your territory, your income depends on it. Keep peasants productive, their output is your salary. Invest in local order. Economic decline in your district means economic decline in your pocket. Cheaper than feudalism, more scalable than mercenaries. Self-regulating at continental scale. But the engine had a fuel requirement: conquest. New land meant new timars. New timars meant new soldiers. New soldiers meant new conquests. New conquests meant new land. Growth fed growth. Stop growing, and the machine starves. This is the logic of every expansion-dependent system. The Ottomans just built it first, and better, and more dangerously, because when the growth stops, the collapse isn't gradual. It's structural. By the late 16th century, the frontier hardened. Habsburgs fortified. Persia resisted. The Mediterranean became contested. New land became scarce. But the military didn't shrink. It grew. Gunpowder warfare demanded infantry, janissaries, who needed cash salaries, not land grants. Standing regiments, permanent payroll. And janissary revolts weren't abstract threats. They toppled sultans. The state needed money it didn't have. So the Ottomans made the decision every declining empire makes. They started selling the future. Iltizam, tax farming. The state auctioned the right to collect provincial taxes to the highest bidder. Bidder pays the treasury up front, then goes to the province and extracts everything above the purchase price. On paper, guaranteed revenue, no collection costs, predictable cash flow. In practice, slow-motion liquidation. The tax farmer's incentive isn't sustainability, it's extraction. Maximum revenue in minimum time. His contract expires in a few years. He won't be there when consequences arrive. The farmer doesn't care if peasants can plant next season. He needs his margin this season. Taxes escalated beyond what the land could sustain. Collection turned violent. Confiscation of tools, livestock, seed grain. Agricultural investment collapsed because farmers couldn't retain enough surplus to reinvest. Peasants fled. Villages emptied. Rural economies withered from the edges inward. The state was selling its future to fund its present. That's not governance. That's a liquidation sale with a flag. Then, in 1695, the empire crossed a line it would never uncross. Malikane. Tax farms became lifetime appointments. For a large, upfront payment, a bidder got the right to collect provincial revenue for life. In practice, the rights became hereditary. Fathers passed them to sons. Revenue streams traded hands in private deals the government couldn't track. This wasn't tax collection. This was privatized sovereignty. Provincial revenue, the lifeblood of the state, was now controlled by private investors with no loyalty to the center, no obligation to maintain infrastructure, and no incentive beyond extraction. The buyers? The very officials who were supposed to regulate the system. Governors purchased their own provinces. Generals bought tax rights for territories they already controlled militarily. Senior bureaucrats invested personal fortunes in revenue streams they were nominally overseeing. The regulator became the profiteer. Corruption wasn't a flaw. Corruption was the business model. Revenue flowed from peasant to tax farmer to Istanbul. Each year less arrived at the center. Each year the middlemen kept more. Provinces got poorer. Tax farmers got richer. Treasury got emptier. The military, the institution holding the empire together, couldn't be paid at full strength. Units understaffed, equipment degraded, morale evaporated. When you can't pay your army, you don't have an empire. You have a real estate portfolio with a flag. By the 19th century, the empire was financially hollow. Provinces were controlled by local strongmen who answered to Istanbul in theory and their own balance sheets in practice. Then came the Europeans, not with armies, with something more effective: loans. The Crimean War of 1853 forced the first foreign borrowing. The interest rates were predatory, far above what European governments paid for equivalent debt. The terms included inspection rights, spending oversight, fiscal supervision. The arrangement resembled a corporate acquisition more than a loan between sovereign states. But the cash was immediate. The janissaries needed paying. The navy needed rebuilding. Provincial fragmentation needed at least the appearance of central response. One loan became five. Five became 15. Each refinancing offered temporary relief and deeper structural dependency. London and Paris bankers competed to lend, not from generosity, but because Ottoman debt carried premium interest rates backed by the full customs revenue of one of the world's largest empires. By 1875, over half of total state revenue, the entire income of a three-continent empire, went to debt service, not to the army, not to roads, not to schools, not to the infrastructure holding the provinces together, to interest payments, flowing steadily to bondholders in London and Paris. The empire was paying its creditors before it could pay its own soldiers. In 1875, default, mathematically inevitable. The empire couldn't service its foreign debt because the conditions of the debt prevented the economic growth needed to service the debt. A structural trap, not a temporary crisis. The European response wasn't sympathetic, it was surgical. In 1881, creditors established the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, the OPDA, a foreign-controlled institution staffed by European appointees, embedded inside the Ottoman state apparatus. Its authority was extraordinary: direct management of Ottoman tax revenue. European bankers sitting physically inside the Ottoman treasury, collecting customs duties on Ottoman trade, managing tobacco monopoly revenue, salt taxes, silk production tithes, stamp duties, alcohol levies, 6 critical revenue streams removed from Ottoman sovereign control entirely. The OPDA paid European creditors first. Whatever surplus remained, if any surplus existed, was released to the Sultan's government. In practice, the Ottoman state received its own revenue on the same basis as a shareholder receiving dividends. After all prior claims were satisfied, the OPDA employed over 5,000 people at its peak. It had more staff than most Ottoman government ministries. A parallel state within the state, answering to London and Paris, not to Istanbul. The empire that besieged Vienna, that conquered Constantinople, that controlled 3 continents for 6 centuries, now a debtor managed by its creditors, Not colonialism through armies, colonialism through compound interest. Sovereignty existed on paper. In financial reality, revenue was pre-allocated before the state could touch a single para. The Sultan signed laws he couldn't fund. The military planned campaigns it couldn't afford. Provincial governors requested resources Istanbul didn't have. Debt doesn't conquer territory. It makes territory irrelevant. The flag still flies. The revenue flows elsewhere. The Ottoman Empire wasn't conquered. It was auctioned. Tax farming sold the rural economy to private extractors. Malikane sold provincial sovereignty to the highest bidder. European debt sold the central treasury to foreign creditors. 3 stages, 1 direction, liquidation. By World War I, nothing remained to sell. The empire entered the war not as a sovereign power, but as a debtor seeking restructuring. Map it directly. When a government privatizes toll roads and a private equity firm doubles the fees while eliminating all maintenance, that is iltizam. Same incentive, same extraction, same decay. When a developing nation takes an IMF loan and foreign consultants dictate the national budget, that is the OPDA, rebranded, digitized, functionally identical. When a city sells its water system to a multinational and residents can't afford to drink, that is malikane, sovereignty privatized, accountability eliminated. When a nation hands its port to a foreign creditor for debt relief, Sri Lanka, Hambantota, that is the final stage, the asset itself transferred. Territory not conquered, purchased at a discount from a debtor with no options. The Ottoman Drain is not ancient history. It is the default trajectory of every state that trades long-term control for short-term cash. The auction never stopped. The currency changed. The mechanism didn't. Empires don't fall when they're attacked. They fall when they start selling themselves.